listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Suns Show.
Good morning and welcome to another Solar Panel. It's a special midweek edition for all you fun folks, live and active folks at 7 a.m. Arizona time, watching on YouTube right now. Hey, more power to you. We're getting you up even earlier than usual. And those obviously listening on the pod forums or watching later on YouTube, thank you for joining us as well. But the ones here who are lucky to be here get to participate in the chat. You guys can ask questions as well. I am Dave King. This is the Suns Solar Panel podcast, and I'm joined by my regular podcasting partner, Brandon, also known as Zona Hoops. How's it going, Brandon?
Good. You know, I've been trying to get you to push this back to 9 a.m. For a while now, and somehow we're here at 7. So
I'll take the heat for that one.
We got joining us.
Doing well. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Brandon actually has been super overworked. He's the media relations coordinator, right? The manager for the Arizona Rattlers. And they've been going hot and heavy. And they even had a game last Friday night, right ahead of the Suns playoff start. So that's why we missed him last weekend. And then today we are joined by a special guest. He is we won't even treat you like the enemy, but you kind of are the enemy today. Mason Ginsberg covers the Pelicans. How you doing, Mason?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, and thanks for accommodating my East Coast time zone.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. We love having different voices on, and for sure, Mason is just about the voice of the Pelicans. And you guys are on this magical run. Tell me, from a Pelicans fan point of view, what's this run been like? And what's obviously you got to be a little surprised they made the playoffs and got through, but maybe not as surprised as the rest of us.
Still surprised. I look at this probably more quantitatively than the typical fan. And back before the trade deadline, I think the Pelicans, as they started to make their run from where they started at 1-12 and 3-16, you saw that they would have a shot at the 10 seed. But even if you get the 10 seed, right, and at that point in January, you're thinking you probably have to play the Lakers and then another team that's formidable. And so even if you get the 10 seed, you're still looking at like a 20% chance to get into the playoffs at best. So it was certainly a surprise. Obviously, the CJ trade gave a different perspective, but even then, you knew you weren't going to get, as the Clippers kind of had a little bit of a run, you knew you weren't going to get into the top 8, which is important because top 8, you only got to win once. 8, 9, or 10, you got to win twice. And so it's a mathematically, it's quite different. And so the fact that they were able to really, obviously, a little fortuitous with Paul George's health and safety protocols, and do they win that game in LA with Paul George playing? I think it's reasonable to say probably not. And so they got there, and here we are, a couple games into a fun series so far with Phoenix. You saw some first half jitters, but for the Pelicans in the first game, but we got ourselves a series now. And whether or not, that's a little, we'll get into why it's a series and it's not looking like a sweep, but it's certainly been quite a ride, and the vibes are good with New Orleans team right now, for the fan base and for the team.
Yeah, tell me your thoughts of how Willie Green is your rookie coach. He was on the Suns staff for a couple of years, so we're familiar with his name, but we didn't really talk to him a whole lot, obviously, because Monty Williams does all the talking with the press and doing interviews and stuff like that. So tell us your impressions of Willie Green as a rookie coach before. Actually, let's start out before this playoff run, because obviously you guys got to be high on him, especially right now. But what did you think during the season of Willie as a coach?
Really not enough good things to say. I'll start. The only thing that has been challenging, and this is going to be the case for any young head coach, especially one who had the NBA playing career in the role that Willie Green did, and that's pulling players in and out of the rotation. And so, I think you saw during the season, Garrett Temple stuck in the rotation for a couple months too long. But Garrett Temple's career was very similar to the career Willie Green had in the NBA. And I think that's, and you're seeing a little bit now with Devontae Graham. A lot of Pelicans fans are kind of wondering what he's doing. He's still in the rotation with how well Jose's played. But you have to realize the human element here is really hard to go tell somebody like Devontae that has started for you for half the season, hey, you're out of the rotation entirely. Like that's a really challenging thing to do. Like Popovich probably will do it without thinking twice, but a young guy like Willie Green, that's what you learn as a head coach. And so, but that's really where the criticisms end. Everything else has been really, really great. The way that the players have bought into his system, to him as a leader, has been fantastic. It's especially when you compare it to the season before. I don't know if you caught Josh Hart's podcast. I can't remember if it was his podcast, the one he did with JJ Redick, but talked about how much he just hated playing basketball under Stan Van Gundy. And so it's really night and day, the culture, the environment that he's created in New Orleans. And so the players they play hard for him. I think you saw in game 1 of the Suns series that it's a team that's not going to quit. And that's something that in the past couple of years, you really couldn't say that about New Orleans. If they fell behind, it's like kind of just mail it in. But really, look at a head coach. The big thing they've got to do is motivate people. You have assistant coaches to do the game plan, to do all the work around rotations, matchups, things like that. But you've got to get your players to buy in as the head coach and to believe in you. And that's Willie Green's done that. And it's really, again, as a 40-year-old head coach, first job as a leader like this. Can't say enough good things about him. We're lucky to have him. Thanks for letting him go.
Sure, absolutely. Brandon, you got a question?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, I think especially given their slow start this season, it just made his coaching performance that much more impressive this year. Just getting them to buy in and change the culture, because I know earlier on in the season when the Pelicans were struggling, and I was like, I hope he's not the scapegoat here, because I think Willie can really coach. So I'm glad they kind of turned it around, and he's been a huge reason, I think, because getting a young team to buy into that culture is not easy. So kudos to him. And, the Pelicans have been a fun story at our expense last game, but hopefully the Suns can get back on track here. So I guess I would say my question for you is, obviously the Pelicans shot 57%, which is their season high from 3. What do you think outside of that the Pelicans can do to kind of keep that offense, I guess, in check against the Suns defense and continue that pace?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with Brandon Ingram, right? You saw how good he played in game 2. I think good defense translates to good offense. And I think the Pelicans, with playing against a team without Devin Booker now, you hope you can get more stops, and that can translate to not transition or fast break points. And the Pelicans will they'll take missed shots and they'll push the pace. They'll try to get easy buckets because half court offense, you see them struggle sometimes because they get a little bit ISO focused with CJ and with Brandon. And so there was some ridiculous shot making in game 2, and I don't think you can consider that sustainable. And so the Pelicans really, I think, have to turn defense into offense here. They've been with Herb Jones. They've been a good defensive team, post All-Star break. As long as they're not playing, Devontae and CJ together, 2 undersized guards. They've been a pretty good defensive team. Not great, but good. And so I think as playing against a team now without their best scorer, the Suns are still a really good team, but I think the Pelicans can really try to turn defensive stops into easier buckets with a defense that's not set. And I know Monty Williams was really stressing how poorly the Suns played in that regard in game 2, and I know he's going to be they're going to be really focused on improving that transition defense in game 3.
Oh, for sure. We are talking today with Mason Ginsberg. Mason, like I said, is the voice for the Pelicans in our world. He has words he writes for Bourbon Street Shots. He pods on the Blue Wire pods in the NO pod. And you really have great insight into the team. Now what I want to talk about a little bit is just catch people up. First of all, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't know how many games have been played, because you're listening 2 weeks from now, because we're such a great podcast, you want to hear all of our voices again. The Suns and the Pelicans are tied at 1 game apiece. The Suns won the first game. They really held New Orleans in check in the first half and had a 53-34 lead at halftime that we all thought, oh gosh, this thing might be a walkover at that point, because the Pelicans just weren't ready for playoff basketball and the Suns were more than ready. And then all of a sudden, part of it might have been the Suns letting up a little bit in the second half because it's such a big lead, and part of it was the Pelicans suddenly deciding they knew how to play basketball again. And the Pelicans only lost by 8 or 9. They lost by 11 in that game, 110-99. So the Suns, it ended up being a close game in the second half. They got it down to 6 points at one point before Chris Paul went off and scored 17 points in the first half of the fourth quarter to basically put the game away for the Suns. And the Pelicans just couldn't close out that game. Then game two, Devin Booker comes in and creates what should be the prevailing meme going on in the NBA playoffs right now, when at the end of the first quarter, he finishes off this absolutely sublime first quarter. He made 4 threes in the quarter. And then as time expired, he hits a fall away jumper where he falls into the first row, the courtside seats, and he daps up a baby. That was incredible. He's sitting there on the floor after having made the shot. The quarter's over, time has expired, obviously, and so it's a dead ball, and he just reaches over and he daps up a baby. That should be the prevailing theme. But then just a few minutes later, Devin Booker pulls a hamstring as the Pelicans are coming back in the game. Pelicans were always in the game. The Suns were actually down at the end of the first quarter, but the Pelicans were establishing themselves throughout the game. The Suns never could get a big foothold. And it was just really incredible watching the Pelicans make every tough shot in that game. And then suddenly you see Devin Booker go down. He pulls the hamstring. And he's done this before. Devin Booker has pulled hamstrings before. He generally misses 2 weeks, although in the finals he strained his hamstring and he played right through it last year, and he was less effective. So I don't know what the Suns are going to do, but he's definitely almost certainly going to miss the weekend games in New Orleans as he recovers. Blaze Megatron, that baby's never going to wash his hand again. Well, babies, if they had any say in it, that hand would always be in their mouth. They'd never wash it anyway. But yes, that's so now we got to talk about what the Suns are going to do, what the Pelicans are going to do over the next few games. Now, we saw in the second half when Devin Booker was out in game 2 and the Pelicans ended up just hitting all the big shots to keep hold of the game and win on the road, and now have taken home court advantage away from the Suns. If the 3 of the next 4 are in New Orleans, they could close out the series. We saw Milwaukee close out a series last year with 3 out of 4 on the road. So it's just at least gain control of the series. It's really tough that the Suns have lost home court advantage. Now, what we saw in the second half, and I want to talk a little bit about this, was now Herb Jones just has one perimeter player to focus on, and that's Chris Paul. And the Pelicans put a lot of length on Chris Paul, mostly, though, Herb Jones in that second half. Do you expect Herb to get most of the defensive assignment against Chris Paul, Mason?
I think so, but I also think that the Suns will do some clever things to avoid that matchup and get Chris Paul away from Herb with using screens. But I think the X factor here, and I'll eat a slice of humble pie on this one, because I was out here screaming after game 1 that Jackson Hayes is not playable in this series. Like the Suns are just kind of leaving him on an island in the corner, and they were basically playing 4-on-5 offensively with Jackson out there, because he can make a 3, but he's not someone that he's shooting low 30%, and he's still developing that shot. The guy only started playing basketball in high school. He's not a knockdown shooter yet. But in game 2, the narrative flipped, and he became a real important piece defensively. And so you saw him switch on to Chris Paul and kind of hold his own, which is not. I mean, I've seen enough Chris Paul games dating back to his New Orleans days to know that if he gets a big on a pick and roll and he gets that switch, it's game over. And so I even thought that Jonas Valanciunas his minutes would go down compared to normal in this series because of what Chris Paul's done to him in previous games. But I think Jackson has been, and now that again with Booker out, they may have a little more flexibility and be able to play him and get by, because I thought he did well on switches against Chris Paul. And so, yes, I think Herb will get that matchup because he's the guy you have to key on. He starts the offense. I think that the Pelicans may have some more flexibility because of what Jackson's been able to provide. I don't think Jackson plays 30 minutes a night now, but I do think he'll be a factor in the rotation, and I'm curious to see how he follows up the performance he had in game 2.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and those leak outs from Hayes and the Pelicans in general really killed the Suns. Just the transition defense, I think, is something that I talked about in the game preview before the game. It's just something that I think you need to limit the Pelicans getting those easy looks, force them to get to their half court sets where they could struggle a little bit. Like we saw in game 1, the Suns just kind of slowed things down for them and just really, especially in that first half, and really force them into some tough shots. I think the Suns need to get back to that if they want to be successful. You can't give a young team like this confidence with those easy buckets, because that leads to, them shooting threes at, with that confidence. So I think from a Suns point of view, it's just transition defense is the number one thing, and the offensive glass they've been killed on. So we need those two things going in the series, but to kind of, get out-rebounded by 30 in 2 games is rough. So hopefully they can clean that up, and, that'll lead to less transition hoops as well.
Mason, what are your thoughts on Jonas Valanciunas playing 30 minutes a night? On one hand, obviously, he's a monster getting the rebounds. And with the Suns doing switch-heavy defense, he often doesn't have DeAndre Ayton fighting him for those rebounds under the basket, because Ayton is got his back turned, guarding the guy driving in, going after. And the Suns have coached him in this series to sell out to, at least in game 1, to sell out to the ball handler if he gets past the guards. And certainly Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum are good at that. But then on the other hand, they seem to have played better when they were the Pelicans seem to have played better when they go small and they have Larry Nance, or they have just overall more versatility in the lineup. So what's your thoughts on Jonas's role going forward?
Yeah, it really depends on how the Suns backfill the minutes for Booker. I think, he was +5 in game 2, so he was able to really. I don't think that they struggled a ton with him out there, but I also think that if it gets down to crunch time, you saw them go to Larry Nance instead of Jonas, because Chris Paul can kind of really expose a big like Jonas. And so I would expect that to happen again. Larry Nance has been huge in this series. He's really been huge down the stretch for New Orleans in those play-in games as well. I think the Pelicans fans were excited to get him in that CJ trade as well, just because if with the assumption that Zion wasn't coming back, that he's a great third big option to have. And if you could get back to how he was playing before he got traded to Portland, that he was a valuable piece. And I think that'll continue. I think you'll see Jonas play 26 minutes in game 2. I think you'll see maybe that tick up a little bit. But I don't really think he'll go over 30. I think you'll see Nance play almost as much as Jonas, whether maybe a little bit together, but mostly separate. And so I'm always concerned about his minutes against Chris Paul, but also with Ayton out there, he's got to be out there for a lot of it. The Pelicans are their rebounding advantage is one of the things that they've got to lean into to really have a chance in the series. And so you've got to rely on him to a degree, but I don't think it's probably as much as you might play him against some other teams because of how big Chris Paul is at exploiting guys like him.
Yeah, Larry Nance was a great pickup. Anyone that's followed me over the last couple off seasons and trade deadlines has known I wanted him in Phoenix for a while now. He's just a perfect, like you said, just perfect third big that could kind of give you both looks as like a small ball center, or you could plug him next to another big if you need to go bigger. But I thought he really cooked JaVale McGee in game 2, and that was kind of the difference. So hopefully the Suns could give him a different look defensively, but I thought just his ability to knock down shots and really defend in space took the Pelicans bench unit to another level. So. Yeah,
and every time I had to remind myself that Nance is 6'7". It blows my mind every time. I feel like he plays like he's 6'9", 6'10", and can switch onto wing. Not really good. He can guard Devin Booker obviously, but he can hold his own in a lot of matchups on the wing, and he can rebound and he can play above his size, which is really nice to have for New Orleans. I'm actually curious. How do you feel about the JaVale McGee minutes so far? Do you think those are going to continue? I think that was of the rotation for Phoenix. I think that was probably the more surprising thing to me to see him playing. He played a decent amount of minutes last night or in game 2. Yeah, 15 minutes. I thought he'd be in the single digits if anything. What do y'all think?
He's been regularly playing a good role as the backup center. Monty Williams in his rotations has really liked having one big and four wings or playmakers out there. And he's very consistent with that. The Suns don't go small without a center very much. So if you're going to see JaVale McGee playing less than 50, if you're going to see the Suns playing JaVale McGee less than 15 minutes, it's either because DeAndre Ayton's going for 40 or he's switching it out for Bismack Biyombo or something like that instead. But JaVale's been really good all season. JaVale's been fun all season as a backup big when he's active and he's in the right. He often gets in the right spots at the right time. He can get you a double in 15 minutes. There were actually fans early in the season saying that JaVale was so good, maybe he should be grabbing minutes from Ayton on a regular basis. That's the JaVale McGee experience. The ultimate we have had the JaVale McGee experience this year where there are plays where you're just like, oh my God, that guy is so talented. And then the very next play he does something going, oh, now I see why he's a backup. So there's that is what we've been experiencing. So I don't expect to stop seeing JaVale McGee out there unless the Suns have decided we're just going to go as many minutes as possible with Ayton, or you want to switch it up and do a Bismack or something like that. From your point of view, Mason, would you say those are some of the I think the reason you asked the question is it appears that those are some of the weaker minutes the Suns have had, like as far as rotations when JaVale's been out there, or what else got you asking the question?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense because I think if you look up and down the Suns rotation, there's not like there are no big power forwards,
No.
within. So it kind of has to be him or, as you said, or Biyombo. I was curious because of how the Pelicans have really managed their bench minutes. They're not sending Billy Hernangomez out there, for example. So it's a combination of Jackson Hayes and Larry Nance, and so there's not really a type of guy that you typically see JaVale handle. Yeah, and so which is if he's going to protect the rim a little bit, that's fine. But yeah, curious if there are concerns about him getting switched on the guards, but also the Pelicans backups aren't exactly.
Well, his big problem is when the other team goes small. I expect Bonnie will have to do some kind of adjustments. He's very loyal to his rotations, and but when the Pelicans go small and you've got Larry Nance as your big out there, JaVale, he only knows how to play in a drop scheme, and he can get cooked by an offense that can shoot from all five positions from the outside. Then we've got the other end of the spectrum. So we're talking about possibly the Suns going a little smaller sometimes when DeAndre Ayton is sitting. And then we've got the big warthog talking about the rebounding discrepancy. The Suns are getting killed on the boards, and maybe we should see a Twin Towers lineup to put Bismack in there next to one of JaVale or Ayton. Brandon, what do you think about the potential for a Twin Towers lineup?
No, thank you. I think we should just kind of, if anything, we should scale back from playing JaVale. I think, especially against Larry Nance in that small ball lineup, because he defensively he looks lost out there, and really, I think that was part of the issue with their defense was they just couldn't really adjust to the Pelicans personnel once the starters were off the floor. So. I think, if anything, even trying out a Torrey Craig and Jay Crowder as your quote unquote bigs, just like what they did against the Clippers last year, that could be an option. But I think they should scale back the JaVale minutes a little bit, specifically against Larry Nance. I think, if Ayton got in foul trouble or something, you need him to match up against Jonas, and that's fine. But in terms of just pure adjustments for lineups, I just don't love the McGee in that small ball lineup. Rebounding issues aside, even with that, I think you got to scale back the JaVale minutes in this series.
Yeah, what's really interesting for the Suns is that they traded rebounding this season. I'm gonna give a bigger picture here real quick. The Suns traded rebounding so that they could be better in transition defense on the other end if the other team gets that rebound. What's gone on in this series against the Pelicans is the Pelicans somehow have been getting both. They've been getting both. They've been getting the rebounds, and the Suns have not been covering transition defense. The Pelicans have gotten out and gotten a lot of a lot of easy scores, especially in game 2. You end up with Jackson Hayes out on the perimeter guarding Chris Paul, and Chris Paul doesn't break him down and get into the paint, or even if Chris Paul does try to break him down and get a paint shot, if the Suns miss, Jackson Hayes is taking off, and he got a few finishes on a fast break and on a long outlet pass. So the Suns have to pick their poison, and what they generally do is they have a really great transition defense, and they pick they pick that, and their poison being defensive rebounding. However, the Suns have won the rebounding battle more than half the time this year. It's just when they can't grab, I think there's a magic number of 40. If they don't grab 40 rebounds, they are barely above 500 this year. If they grab under that, they're barely above 500. If they grab over that, then they're almost undefeated. So there is a tipping point where the Suns just need to get a representative number of rebounds. My problem with a small lineup is that the Suns' wings have not been grabbing rebounds. Torrey Craig had 0 rebounds in game 1. And I'm not looking at the box score right now, but I don't think he grabbed too much in game 2 as well. Dre Crowder has been terrible in this series. Cameron Johnson has not grabbed many rebounds in this game. Mikal Bridges might be the 4 wings leading rebounder, and he's averaging about 4 or 5. So it's tough. You can't go totally small if none of those guys is willing to rebound. So what the Suns need to see is those guys being much more active. At least the one who's assigned to go after, contest for rebounds, needs to go after the rebounds. Mason, what's your thought on the rebounding discrepancy so far?
Well, you hit the nail on the head as far as the differences, and you see, like, for example, for New Orleans in game 2, the big rebounders besides Jonas were their wing was CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram, and so what they're doing is kind of holding those guys back to help on the glass and to take an outlet pass and push the ball up, and then you're seeing your power forward, so to speak, Jackson Hayes has got like 3 rebounds in the game because he's leaking out. This is how the Pelicans are creating transition opportunities off of missed shots. Not it doesn't have to be a turnover. That it's they've got this. They've got a kind of a system down as to how to create those fast break opportunities. And so, I think that's something they'll try to continue. And I'm sure that's one of the big keys to the Suns' focus between game 2 and game 3 is how to limit that. And like you said, you've got to send you got to kind of play the balance, because it's not like you want to send the house to offensive rebound for the Suns. That's because that's not a winning proposition, but you've got to be able to get your defense back and set as quickly as possible to prevent the Pelicans from creating chances like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the rebounding discrepancy for the Pelicans, like the plus 20 on offensive rebounds in game 1, part of that was because they made 20% of their shots. I mean, there was a lot of rebounds to be had in that game. In game 2, the Pelicans had a lot fewer offensive rebounds, and the discrepancy was manageable by the Suns. Where the Pelicans won in game 2 was the incredible shot making, but the rebounding discrepancy was manageable in game 2 because the Pelicans were making a representative number of shots. So it's just one of those things. It is interesting though what you pointed out, Mason. I think Suns fans need to pick up on this. It was McCollum, and my recollection is McCollum had 8 rebounds, and Brandon Ingram had 11 rebounds. Those guys are not any bigger than the Suns guys. I mean, McCollum's only 6'2", for example. And it was Jackson Hayes, who you said 3 rebounds, but he got out on the break. So they have the bigs leaking and the littles staying for those rebounds on the Suns' misses. And you know what? That's not a winning proposition to try to stop that from happening. What you got to do is play transition defense and stop the scoring in transition, stop that outlet pass because the guy's not open. Make them get into a half court game because they're not as good in the half court as they are in the open court. You're on mute, Mason.
I should know better at this point. So the Pelicans had 32 defensive rebounds in game 2. Larry Nance, Jonas Valanciunas, CJ McCollum, and Brandon Ingram had 30 of those 32. Those 4 players. Trey Murphy had 1 rebound. Herb Jones had 1 rebound. That's not a coincidence. This is a tactic the Pelicans are deploying to try to have put the ball in the right person's hands and get the ball on the floor, and also put the right people flying out on the break. And so the Pelicans will keep trying to do this, but I have no doubt that the Suns will have a better plan to stop it, especially when you consider for as good as Devin Booker is, he's obviously he's the Suns' best player. He's fantastic, but he's not the best defender. The Suns have been better defensively with him off the floor. There's a bunch of conflating variables there, but I think that the Suns can be a better defensive team with him out, depending on what rotations they use. And so I think they may be better equipped to stop it. It's just a question of can you create the offense?
Yeah, the Suns defense is really predicated on those guys knowing where each other are. So one of the struggles that these Suns have, and maybe this 2 days of practice will help, is that when you mess up their rotations, they no longer know exactly what the other 4 guys are doing every moment on the court because they have different roles and different lineups. So they haven't. So let's talk about Brandon. I want to ask you, who do you think starts in Devin Booker's absence for 2 games in New Orleans? And who ends up with the most minutes in Devin Booker's absence in that role? Because those could be the same answer or 2 different answers. What do you think, Brandon?
I think it'll be 2 different answers. I think Cam Johnson will start. I think Landry Shamet will benefit the most in terms of minutes with the second unit and filling that Booker role when they need someone that, they can run off screens and get some actions for. But yeah, I think Cam Johnson, his size and just getting his confidence too, just going, I think that'll be huge. I think you got to start the best players and match the Pelican size any way you can. So I think getting Cam, and if we get that, New York Knicks Cam where he just couldn't miss and just kind of takes over and just gets his confidence back, then that'd be great. But, I think he's the one that's got to probably step up the most in terms of not only production, but just, getting those shots up. I want to see 10+ threes from him per game with Booker out. I think he just needs to have that confidence. So we'll see if he does.
Yeah, I think I'm with you that Landry Shamet and Cam Johnson are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of Devin Booker being out. But I'm going to flip it. In my opinion, I think they're going to start Landry Shamet. And because Monty likes the guys who are in the roles and all that, and Cam spends more of his time at a 3-4 position than he does at a 2 position. I think but Cam will end up with the most minutes because then the Suns are going to go into their switch heavy defense and Cam holds up better than Landry in that rhythm. But I do think those 2 are going to be the biggest beneficiaries. So who scores the most points, Brandon? Is it going to be Cam Johnson, or is it going to be Landry Shamet in Game 3? Let's do a prediction here.
Cam Johnson. I don't think Landry's going to play as many minutes as you'd think. I still think he'll get some decent run, but I think Cam Johnson is going to close the game, and he's also going to just have a lot more looks than Landry will. So I think Cam Johnson will score exactly 21 points. Landry Shamet will score 11. So put that in your DraftKings bet slip.
21 and 11. All right. So Mason, what's your reaction to hearing us talk about filling Devin Booker's minutes?
I mean, it's impossible to backfill for a guy like that. And I know I didn't look at the record or who the games were against, but I know Phoenix was 8-6 without Booker this year, so they can handle his absence. That they're not the elite team that they are typically without him, but. I think it gives the Pelicans a little bit more flexibility in how they match up. I think I wouldn't recommend it, but I think it means more minutes for Devontae Graham. That one of the reasons he's unplayable is because you can't. Booker's going to torch him if he's out there, and so without him, I think I would not be surprised to see Willie Green see if Devontae can catch fire because that's the value in playing him at this point. And now that you have CJ, it's not a start. He's not a starter, but he's kind of lightning in a bottle, and so. I think Willie will throw him out there, see if it's good Devontae Graham, and then he may give him some minutes if he's hitting shots. Otherwise, the rotation may not change too much. I mean, I think you're seeing. I think Jose will still get his minutes. Trey Murphy will still get his minutes. I think Trey's been huge for the team this series. I think that was the most predictable thing coming in is that Murphy's been getting more minutes in the last couple of months, and he's really made the most of them. And he's their best kind of wing floor spacer off the bench that they have. Led the rookie class in 3-point percentage. Not as many attempts as a lot of other guys, but that was what you thought you were getting from him when you drafted him. And so I think a lot of that stays consistent. I am curious what happens with Najee Marshall's minutes because I think he's a guy that they use him off the bench and kind of as a secondary creator and as a guy who. Once Herb Jones comes out, you have Herb Jones light on defense. That's kind of how they view him because he is a tough defender. But again, how necessary is that now that Devin Booker's out of the game? And if Cam Johnson comes in or checks in earlier and is playing more with the starters, do you need Najee Marshall playing, or can you focus minutes on other players? Like Murphy. So I think there are some considerations for Willie. I think he's a kind of a creature of habit to start here, and his rotations probably won't change that much. But if he sees an opening, sees a weakness, I think he'll jump on it as early as the second half of Game 3.
Big Warthog in the chat points out something I wanted us to touch on. Is that he says, Big Warthog says, I don't think we should play Payne, Craig, and McGee together. They've been a horrible lineup. Now, I just want to talk about that a little bit. The Suns acquired Torrey Craig reacquired Torrey Craig at the trade deadline. They obviously have they signed McGee in the offseason. They've had Cam Payne as their backup point guard for a couple of years. In that lineup, they also play with Cameron Johnson and JaVale McGee. So you've got Cam Payne, Torrey Craig, Cam Johnson, JaVale McGee, and Landry Shamet as your second unit. Monty's been wanting to get that second unit together all year. Finally got a chance in the last week and a half to play them together. They've been absolutely horrible. And he did it again in Game 2, putting those 5 out there with no starters at the end of the maybe is in the second quarter in the middle, or maybe in the third quarter. I can't remember, but all 5 were there together. And I was just like, oh my God, here we go again. Monty is a creature of habit too. I think Willie Green and Monty Williams are kind of cut from the same cloth. And he really wants to see that lineup succeed, but they're not succeeding. So you're going to see a lot more mixing and matching of Suns starters with bench guys, hopefully in Game 3. You will see Torrey Craig. You'll see all those guys out there, but in different iterations of each other. And that's why I think he's going to put Landry Shamet with the starters so that he can already start with some starters, some bench groupings together. But the guy who really can be a big difference maker in this series is Cameron Payne. We haven't talked about him much at all. He can't make a shot for the life of him. And I watch him in pregame warmups, and I know this isn't the point at which he should be making all of his shots, but he's actually doing, like a lot of guys, in the hour before the game starts, they come out on the court as the fans are gathering, and they come out on the court and they just kind of do some easy shots to just practice, their shot rhythm. They don't build up a sweat. The fans, they don't want to see the fans. They don't want the fans to see them fail or anything like that. You can see bigs who never take threes make 23s in a row. That kind of thing is what happens in pregame warmup when the fans are arriving. And yet lately, Cam Payne has been working his butt off with one of the assistant coaches in getting, practicing his catch and shoot threes, and just he's sweating like crazy, trying to get a rhythm on his catch and shoot threes, but right before the game starts so he can start making some again. And he misses them even in warmups. So if Cam Payne can find his range, that makes the Suns a lot more dangerous. A year ago, he made 45% of his threes, 43%, something like that. The bubble before that, he made 50%. This year he's making 30%, and lately he's been making 0%. Him and Jay Crowder are just the Brick Brothers. It's just crazy how they can't make any shots. That'll be a big difference for the Suns this weekend in NOLA if they can start making shots. Mason, do you have guys that you're thinking are X factors for your team that can make or break games 3 and 4 in New Orleans?
Well, to speak to that point specifically, I think the Pelicans, one of the other impacts of Booker not playing is that I'm much less concerned about Herb Jones getting into foul trouble. That was one of my big worries before the series, not thinking that there's going to be a competitive series with the Suns healthy, but Herb Jones is the Pelicans' best defender. He's been excellent, but he's also a rookie, and rookies generally don't get defensive respect. And so he does foul. All rookies tend to foul. Their foul rates are reasonably high. I also think he gets called for some that I don't really. I question whether or not they're fouls. And so against a guy like Booker, that's terrifying, right? And so the fact that he's not playing now, I'm much less worried about her getting in foul trouble, which kind of correlates to the Najee comment I made earlier. But the reason I bring that up is because now you've got a little more freedom on how you play Jose Alvarado, and Jose has been the Pelicans' best, pure guard defender. So Herb's more of a guard wing forward hybrid. But Jose, I think, can give Cam Payne a lot of problems And so, and I think really, I'm curious to see how Willie Green's typically been holding him until the second quarter in the rotations. I don't think that necessarily changes to start, but I do think if Payne starts getting hot, that Jose will go guard him. And so again, Jose Alvarado is an undrafted rookie. He's not an all defensive caliber player, but he is someone who'll get up in you and cause problems. And so I do think that that's something Willie Green can do more liberally now with Booker out and having to worry about foul trouble a little bit less. But as far as Pelicans X factors, I really think Trey Murphy is such a big one. I think similar to Phoenix, like if Jay Crowder hits 4 corner threes or 5 corner threes, it totally changes the game. Same holds true for Trey Murphy. Although Jay Crowder, it infuriates me every time he makes a three because he's like a 33% career shooter, and whenever he's getting shots, I'm always like, this is a win for the defense, especially when Booker and Paul are out there and Eaton. But I think Trey Murphy, who dead-eye shooter in college, has been a good shooter for the Pelicans this season. If he can get high, I don't really want to call Devontae Graham an X factor because my hope is still that he doesn't play that much. But Trey Murphy is going to play, and if he can start making some threes and getting opportunities, which to the Suns' credit, they've been good at preventing those opportunities for him. I think it really could tilt things in the Pelicans' favor.
So I want to give you a minute, and we have spent this entire podcast hardly even mentioning the names of CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram. That is a pairing that's been really good for the Pelicans. For fans watching the Pelicans especially on Tuesday night in Game 2, you wonder how the heck did they only win 36 games in the year? And part of it is the guys who are around them just haven't been as good, but also they've hardly played together. CJ was acquired at the trade deadline. Brandon Ingram's been in and out of the lineup with injuries. They actually had a winning record with those two in the lineup over, I think it was 11-6 maybe. And they've won 10 of their last 12, something along that line. So Mason, tell me what you've seen on the growth between those two as a tandem on the court.
Yeah, it's really impressive because typically when you see deadline deals occur, there are some growing pains. Like the most recent example in New Orleans was when they traded for DeMarcus Cousins. There was so much extement because they traded Buddy Hield and really not much else for Boogie. Right. And then that didn't go very well because integrating him alongside Anthony Davis was really hard. Things were going great the following year once they had time to really figure it out. But I think CJ and then Nance too. It's really been impressive how seamlessly they've integrated into this team. And I think CJ has really taken on the same type of role that Devontae Graham had in the starting lineup, but he's way better at it. And so it's been and I think BI and CJ have learned to play off each other. And it's really selfless basketball. That no one's really asking for more shots or upset that the other one's taking more shots. I think it's been really fun to see. And like you said, the team, I think they've been top 10 on both sides of the ball since February or the trade deadline. So they've been a legitimately good team with Ingram healthy. Ingram's missed some time down the stretch, and so the Pelicans did struggle for a bit without him. But really, with CJ, with Ingram, and Ingram, it's worth mentioning the strides he's made defensively this year. Willie Green's got him playing defense last year. He was arguably one of the worst wings in the league defensively. And so between those two and Herb Jones, that three-man group is really powerful, and it can play against any opposing lineup. Whereas Jonas, you may have to pull him out in certain cases, that matchup wise. But those three, especially if CJ's your smallest player out there, it's a dangerous combo. And so they're not an elite team by any stretch, but they are a good team. And so I think they're definitely better than their record given the personnel they have now. And continuity, you mentioned continuity earlier. It's a huge factor. I mean, the Pelicans were a good team right before the deadline too, with the similar lineup with Josh Hart in the mix, because they play together a lot. It was a very balanced group as far as what the skills each player brought to the table. But now it's kind of that, but even better because of what CJ brings. So it's been fun, and whether or not the season ends in a few games, there's a lot of excitement brewing in New Orleans about what you can do moving forward if you add a guy like Zion Williamson to the bunch, right?
Oh my God. That'd be incredible. We'll talk about Zion on another day for sure, because he's not playing in this series. Brandon, now I want to ask you, what do you see as the Suns' biggest adjustments in games 3 and 4? We'll be talking again on Saturday in a couple of days, but let's talk about game 3. What changes, what different things do you think you're going to see in game 3 as far as Suns adjustments?
I think more of just an emphasis on executing your offense because, what leads to that transition and those leak outs is missing shots. And I think just by, executing, getting good looks and making shots and slowing them down is going to be huge. So I think just attention to detail, making sure that they're running their sets to Chris Paul level standards, where I really think he's going to take more of a general lead in this game in terms of just slowing things down, making sure everything's done right. And just, the Suns using their experience and just battle tested from last playoff run to kind of overwhelm the Pelicans because they do have a young group. They have a lot of talented rookies that have stepped up big. And I think the Suns just need to find ways to take advantage of their inexperience and also just kind of, like I said, just eliminate the transition looks. And I think that'll lead to, the 3-point numbers dropping and the Pelicans offense struggling at times, because that's the main thing, just getting the pace more towards the Suns' favor and doing what they like to do best and really just kind of shrinking the game. Like that's the key for them. If they want to win without Booker, it's going to be tough. We got a series now. I think the Pelicans in general are better than a typical 8 seed just because, having two creators that can hit tough shots like Ingram and McCollum, that's what the playoffs are all about. So, to me, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I'd rather play like a team like Denver than the Pelicans in the first round, just based off that, because you only have to worry about Jokic really with that team. With the Pelicans, they got so many options, and it was definitely a tough draw, and it's just something I think I saw the Suns winning the series in 6, but I do think it's going to be, confidence level is definitely not what it was with Booker healthy, and I think the Suns fans, saying Suns in 5, just need to relax a little bit. This is going to be a tough series, so they got to at least get a split here and on the road and kind of take back home court advantage and go from there.
Okay, let's wrap this up with some predictions. So games 3 and 4, Mason, those are in New Orleans. What's the series record going to be after 4 games? So after games 3 and 4.
So I think the Pelicans have to win both to have a chance in the series. I think if it goes 2-2 back to Phoenix, it's a tough proposition for the Pelicans. However, that's what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to split the games in New Orleans. I think game 3. Honestly, if the Pelicans lose game 3, they're in a really, really tough spot. I think that the energy in the Smoothie King Center is going to be phenomenal. Everyone around the city is so excited for these games this weekend. And so I do expect Pelicans to take game 3. I think game 4 becomes the winner of game 4 is really in the driver's seat to win the series for me, which isn't necessarily like revolutionary or anything, but I do think even more so here it applies because I can tell you that New Orleans fans still have nightmares back to 2008. This is how infrequently the Pelicans have been or Hornets at the time have been a truly dangerous team. But the Hornets were the 2 seed. The Hornets were the 1 seed and the Spurs were 2 or 3. Sorry. The Hornets had home court advantage and they were playing for the right to play the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. And the Pelicans had, they lost that series on the home floor. And so they had home court advantage and they lost it. And and I know people don't forget, because that was the best team that this city's had, that 07-08 New Orleans Hornets team. And so, home court's valuable and you don't want to, lose it. Now that the Pelicans have it, they got to keep it. But we'll see how things go. Okay.
So you're saying 1-1 over the weekend. Brandon, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm with him. I agree. I think game 3, the Pelicans they're going to be riding a high. They're going to have the home court advantage. All the players are confident still. So I think I'm going to go the Pelicans are going to win game 3. Suns will take game 4. And I know you didn't ask, but I think games 5 and 6, the Suns will take as well. That's why I have the Suns in 6. But, that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. So that's my overall prediction. I wasn't here for last week's show when we made the full series prediction, so just wanted to throw that out there.
I only had people predicting the first 2 games actually, because we're potting often enough, and really I love how the series change. I love how playoff series change game to game. So predicting the overall is not as fun. Like you're predicting Suns in 6, great, but how the Suns get to the 6, how they get there is to me is more fun than just predicting the overall series. That's kind of lame because then you don't know if you were right for 2 weeks. So we've just been predicting small snippets at a time. And so let's just staying with these 2 games. I'm going to look, I think there's a good chance that the Suns win both in New Orleans, and I don't think that's just me being a homer. And let me explain why. And I know as much as it'd be fun to see the series go 6 games, and it still may go 6 games, the Suns' backs are against the wall. They've been the winningest team in the league for 2 years. They know how to win games. They know how to buckle down. Mason, you said, the Suns were 8-6 without Booker. Yeah, 3 of those were rest games at the end of the year, so they're really 8-3 without Booker. That is, the Suns know how to win without guys. They were 11-4 without Chris Paul, 8-3 without Booker, 18-3 without Ayton. They know how to win without guys. What the Suns have not been doing in the last month is playing their best basketball. They haven't been totally focused and driven and playing like the underdog because they clinched the top seed in the league a month ago. And at that point, what else is there? And now you get into, seriously, I think some of this is psyche. Now you get into the playoffs and you're facing a 10 seed. So you're thinking, oh, well, it's kind of an extended regular season. The playoffs haven't really started yet. At least on the back of their minds, I haven't seen the team as focused as they were a year ago when they were playing the Lakers, because teams were picking the Lakers to win that series. And so the Suns were backs against the wall, even though they were the 2 seed a year ago. This year, finally, the Suns are have some adversity. They're a little bit backs against the wall. I'm looking for them to play their balls out this weekend. If the Suns don't play hard this weekend, this is not going to be a good playoff run for the Suns. They still probably will end up beating the Pelicans, even if they don't play balls out, because Booker will eventually be back. Chris Paul knows how to close games. This team is just that good, but it won't be a great playoff run if the Suns don't play really well this weekend. As far as effort, now they still might drop a game, but they've got to play with maximum effort on this weekend. So I really think the Suns win game 3 and game 4 is the toss up. That's my guess. Brandon, you and I will be talking again this weekend after game 3. So we'll see if that came true. If the Suns lay down in game 3, I don't have great feelings about the rest of this playoffs run, with or without Devin Booker. So let's see what happens this weekend. Mason, I love the way the Pelicans are playing. I love Willie Green as a coach. Man, that pump up timeout. Okay, the last question I have for you, then we're going to let you go. I know we're running late. But that pump up timeout when the Pelicans, I think at the time they were down 7 or 10 or something like that against the Clippers. They had gone down in that third quarter after having the lead, and Willie Green does his pump up thing where he's shaking his head as he's going, we fought all year for this. We're not going to lay down. We're not going to give up. Then all of a sudden the Pelicans this young team suddenly galvanized and came back and won that game. What are they talking about in New Orleans about that timeout speech that Willie had?
That second half was really a microcosm of the season for the Pelicans and how Willie Green's kept them fighting all year long. Because I could argue that third quarter was one of the most poorly coached stints of the season for Willie Green. I mean, putting Tony Snell in the game there was inexcusable when Trey Murphy was just sitting there. There were some, the rotations were maddening at the time. And then he had one of the best quarters of the season coaching. All the rotations he used in the fourth quarter were perfect. And obviously the team, he got the team hyped up, and it was you could just tell that they were running at 110 miles an hour. I mean, I think it was very motivational. The city all got behind it. Everyone's excited, and so I think win or lose this series, it's a really positive step for New Orleans, and it's why I kind of roll my eyes sometimes when why did the Pelicans trade for CJ? Because they're only going to be an 8 seed now, and they're just giving themselves a worse draft pick, and it's just like. It's not like win the championship or lose 60 games. There are steps that a franchise has to take to get from one step to one level to the next, and I think the Pelicans are showing that this year. It's an important step for the franchise, and we're excited.
Well, Suns fans will be able to relate because they had that gap, that step up year. Right. So they lost 63 games with Booker, Mccollum, and DeAndre Ayton. Ayton and Bridges were rookies. Then they won 34 with Ricky Rubio. They acquired Ricky Rubio. When everybody said the same thing you just said, Mason, why would you go for an 8 seed? Why would you go for like the middle ground? You either got to win 60 or lose 60. There's no in between. Yeah, there is an in between. You have to have an in between to have that step to step up. And I think the Pelicans have done that. And now, like the Suns adding Chris Paul in that second season, you guys adding Zion Williamson in your second season of this group together, that's going to be a really good team because you got the right coach in place. You've got the right players in place. I have some questions on how David Griffin will handle the offseason, but you know what? Suns fans have had questions about how their front office will handle off seasons forever. So
and we have a top 10 Lakers pick coming our way. So,
and you got a top 10 Lakers pick.
Too. I think we can
Screw you, Lakers.
Yeah, I think we can all enjoy that.
Yes. So it definitely this is a great future for the Pelicans, and I think it'll be a very competitive series. The Suns I think the Suns just have too much talent to lose it, for sure. Okay, so that's our predictions for the weekend. We think they're going to go 1-1, but how they go 1-1 is different for each person, and I'm calling Game 3 for the Suns. Thank you, everybody, for being in the chat. I really appreciate you joining us early in Arizona on a Thursday morning, and or in Australia for some of you. I know some of you are down in the outback there, and thank you for joining us on your Friday. I appreciate you guys. Mason, thanks again for coming on. Tell us where we can find you for your Pelicans coverage during this series.
Yeah, sure. So just my name, Mason Ginsberg on Twitter, and I'm not doing much in the writing game anymore, but my co-host Shimit Dua and I do the In the Know podcast for Blue Wire. So that's where you'll find me most frequently. So yeah, definitely check us out.
In the Know podcast on Blue Wire. Excellent. Brandon, tell us where we can find you talking about the Suns this weekend.
Yeah, just at Zona Hoops _ on Twitter, brightsideofthesun.com and zonahoops.com. And looking forward to some playoff basketball, not just Suns. I mean, there's been some crazy games around the league, so it's just exciting time to be a fan.
Yeah, Saturday we'll catch up on the entire league as a whole, for sure, Brandon. I want to do a whole section on that, and then catch up with you a little bit more as well on what you've thought about the Suns in the playoffs and how they adjusted in Game 3. I am Dave King. You can find me at Dave King NBA on Twitter. You can find our writing, me and Brandon, on brightsideofthesun.com. And, of course, this podcast will be back Saturday morning, 2 days from now. Talk to y'all later. Thank you so much for joining us today.